I still remember folding my brother's funeral program when the lawsuit papers hit my doorstep. My hands were still shaking from the burial. We hadn't even packed up his apartment yet. And she, the woman he loved, the woman we welcomed into our family, had already called a lawyer. She wanted every dollar of his life insurance. The policy my parents paid for. The policy with my name on it. I thought grief was the worst thing I'd ever feel. I was wrong. Standing there in my doorway, holding those papers in one hand and his funeral program in the other. I had to make a choice. Fall apart. Or fight back. What happened next took 14 months, 2 attorneys, a judge, and one phone call I never expected, to reach the other side of the darkest chapter of my life. To understand any of this, you need to know who my brother Marcus was to me. We were Irish twins, less than a year apart. Grew up sharing everything. A bedroom, a bathroom, one beat-up bicycle we both claimed was ours. Our parents weren't rich. Dad worked 2 jobs most of my childhood. Mom stretched grocery, money like it was elastic. But they were generous in every way that mattered. When Marcus and I were teenagers, Dad took out a life insurance policy on both of us. $50,000 each, named as beneficiaries for the other. It was his way of saying, if anything ever happens, your family has you. Marcus and I never talked about it much. Who thinks about death at 17? We were too busy arguing about the TV remote and sneaking snacks after midnight. He was my best friend. He was the person who knew me better than anyone on earth. And then, 3 years ago, I got the phone call no sibling is ever ready for. Marcus met Diane about 2.5 years before he died. He brought her to Sunday dinner for the first time, and I still remember thinking, okay, she's stunning. Confident. The kind of woman who fills a room. My mom had made her famous pot roast. Diane pushed it around her plate and said she was watching her macros. Mom smiled and said nothing. That should have been my first clue. But Marcus was glowing. Genuinely, stupidly in love. And when your brother looks at someone like she hung the moon, you try. You really try. I tried. I invited her to girls' nights. I texted her memes I thought she'd like. I included her in family group chats. Over time, I thought it was working. She started coming around more. Helped plan our mom's birthday. Laughed at our inside jokes. Marcus proposed 8 months before he died, and she said yes. We threw them an engagement party in my parents' backyard. 50 people. Fairy lights. The whole thing. I genuinely thought she was becoming my sister. I genuinely believed that. Looking back, the signs were there. I just didn't let myself see them. The first thing I noticed was money talk. Not in a normal way. Within 6 months of them dating, Diane knew exactly what Marcus made. What his 401k looked like. What his benefits package included. I remember thinking, wow, they're really open with each other. Maybe that's healthy. Then Marcus mentioned, almost casually one evening, that Diane had asked him to update his beneficiaries. At work, on his retirement accounts, I asked him, jokingly, what about the life insurance policy? He laughed and said Dad's old policy still had my name on it, and he didn't see a reason to change something Mom and Dad had set up. Diane was apparently less comfortable with that. Marcus said she brought it up a couple of times. He said he told her it was family business, and she dropped it. But here's the thing about people who drop it. Sometimes they're just waiting. Sometimes quiet isn't peace. It's just patience with a different plan underneath it. Marcus died suddenly. A blood clot. He was 31 years old, completely healthy as far as any of us knew, and then he was just gone. 4 days in a hospital, and then gone. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on those 4 days because honestly, I still can't. What I will tell you is that Diane was there. At the hospital. Every day. And in those moments, I held her hand. I told her he loved her more than anything. I meant every word. But 2 weeks after the funeral, exactly 14 days, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. It was Diane's attorney. He told me his client was disputing the beneficiary designation on Marcus's life insurance policy. $50,000. He used words like common law entitlement and reasonable expectation of inheritance. I didn't even fully understand what he was saying at first. My brain couldn't compute it. I sat down on my kitchen floor and I just stayed there for a long time. And then I started to remember things. Small things. Things I had brushed aside for 2.5 years. All of them suddenly making a very different kind of sense. So at this point, here's where things stood. Marcus was gone. Diane had lawyered up in 14 days. And I was sitting on my kitchen floor with $50,000 and my dead brother's name hanging over my head. That's when I called my cousin Renee, who works in estate law. She told me to stop panicking and start documenting. So I did. I went through everything. And what I found was a pattern. Diane had tried, twice, to get Marcus to update that policy. I found texts on an old shared family tablet Marcus had used at our parents' house. In those texts, she pushed hard. She used guilt. She said things like, "I should be your priority now, not your family." Marcus had written back, "The policy is my parents' decision. Please stop." She stopped texting about it. But she didn't stop. Because when I called the insurance company directly, a representative told me something that made my stomach drop. Someone had called their general inquiry line 3 separate times in the 18 months before Marcus died, asking about the process for contesting a named beneficiary after a policyholder's death. The calls were made from a number I recognized immediately. It was Diane's. I know a lot of people would have let their attorney handle everything from that point forward. And part of me knew I should. But I needed to look her in the eyes. I called Diane directly. She picked up on the second ring, which surprised me. I told her I knew about the calls to the insurance company. There was a pause. Not a guilty pause. A calculating one. Then she said, "And I will never forget this as long as I live, he would have wanted me taken care of." That was it. No apology. No shame. Just that sentence, delivered like it was obvious. Like I was the unreasonable one. I told her that Marcus had specifically chosen not to change that policy. That he had told her, in writing, to stop pushing. She said the policy was outdated, and that his real wishes would have been different if he'd had more time. I asked her how she knew what his real wishes were. She said, "Because I knew him better than you did." I hung up. My hands were shaking. Not from grief this time. From something else entirely. The weeks that followed were the worst of my life. And that's saying something, because I had just buried my brother. The lawsuit was formally filed about 6 weeks after Marcus died. Diane was claiming that, as his fiancée and domestic partner of over 2 years, she had a reasonable expectation to the life insurance proceeds. Her attorney cited case law. He was not bluffing. My parents were devastated, not just by losing Marcus, but by watching this unfold in real time. My dad, who had paid premiums on that policy for 14 years, couldn't understand how any of this was legally possible. My mom stopped eating properly. I was the one fielding calls from our attorney, translating legal language for my parents, managing my own grief, and simultaneously being accused of stealing from a widow who wasn't even technically a widow. I lost 12 pounds in 2 months. I stopped sleeping well. There were days I thought, maybe it's not worth fighting. Maybe I should just give her half and let it end. Maybe Marcus would have wanted peace over money. Those thoughts terrified me. Because I knew if I let them win, I was letting her rewrite who my brother was. The decision came on a Sunday morning. I was at my parents' house. My dad was sitting at the kitchen table, and he had Marcus's old baseball glove in his hands. Just holding it. Not saying anything. Just holding it. And I thought about what my dad had done for us our whole lives. 2 jobs. 14 years of insurance premiums. Every single sacrifice made quietly, with no expectation of a thank you. Diane had spent 2.5 years calculating how to take the result of those sacrifices. I picked up my phone and called our attorney. I said, "We are not settling. Not for $1. We are taking this all the way, and I need you to tell me exactly what we need to win." She told me we needed to establish clear intent. We needed documentation. We needed to demonstrate that Marcus had knowingly and deliberately maintained the original beneficiary designation. We had the texts. We had the insurance inquiry records. And as it turned out, we had one more thing. Something I didn't even know existed yet. My attorney's name was Carol, and she was methodical in a way that calmed me down when nothing else could. She told me the case hinged on one central question. Did Marcus demonstrate, through action or communication, that he intentionally maintained the beneficiary designation? The texts were strong. The insurance inquiry records were damaging to Diane's credibility. But Carol wanted something more personal, something in Marcus's own voice. And that's when my mom mentioned the letters. Every year on our birthdays, going back 15 years, Marcus had written each of us a handwritten letter. He thought it was old-fashioned and meaningful. Most of them were funny. Some were sentimental. Mom had kept every single one in a shoebox at the back of her closet. We went through them together one afternoon, the three of us at that kitchen table. And in a letter Marcus had written to me just 11 months before he died, he mentioned the insurance policy directly. He said, and I'm paraphrasing from memory, "Dad set that up for us and I'll never touch it. It's yours if anything ever happens to me." That's just how it is, 11 months before he died. His handwriting. His words. Carol read it and said quietly, professionally, "This is what we needed." The hearing was set for about 9 months after Marcus died. Diane's attorney arrived with a thick folder and a confident posture. I sat next to Carol, and I kept my hands flat on the table so they wouldn't shake. Diane was across the room. She did not look at me once. Carol presented our case methodically. The text showing Marcus explicitly refusing to change the policy. The insurance company records showing that Diane, not Marcus, had been the one researching contestation procedures while he was still alive. And then, the letter. Carol read it aloud in that quiet room. Marcus's words in his voice about that exact policy. I watched Diane's attorney lean over and whisper something to her. She whispered back. Her posture changed. It was small, but I saw it. The judge asked Diane's counsel if they wished to present any counter-documentation showing Marcus had expressed any desire to change the beneficiary designation. The answer was no. There was none. Because there never had been. The judge ruled in my favor. Full amount. $50,000. All of it. The case was dismissed. Court costs were awarded against Diane's filing. Her own legal fees, which her attorney had apparently taken on partial contingency, believing this was a winnable case, left her owing money she hadn't planned on. I didn't celebrate. I sat in my car in the parking lot and I cried. Not from happiness. From exhaustion. From missing Marcus. From wishing none of this had ever happened at all. I'm on the other side of it now. The money sits in an account I haven't fully touched. Some of it went to a headstone upgrade my parents wanted for Marcus. Some went to a scholarship fund at his old high school. His idea of a legacy felt right. The rest I'm holding until I know what he would have done with it. And I think I'll know when I know. What I learned from all of this is hard to compress into a tidy lesson. But if I try, it's this. Grief makes you vulnerable in ways you don't expect. And there are people in this world who will watch someone grieve and see opportunity instead of pain. The best protection against that is documentation, family communication, and the willingness to fight for someone's truth even after they are gone. Marcus chose that policy for a reason. He put my name on it deliberately. Defending that wasn't about money. It was about making sure his choices still meant something. It was the last thing I could do for him. And I did it. If you watched this far, thank you. Truly. If Marcus's story moved you, if you've ever had to fight for someone who couldn't fight anymore, drop a comment below and tell me about it. And if this video meant something to you, please hit like and subscribe to Dossier Karma. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people who need to hear stories like this one. I read the comments. I see you. I'll be back with another story soon.